How great would it be to get up close and personal with the beauty industry heroes we love and admire, and to ask them, how did you learn to do what you do? I'm Chris Baran, a hairstylist and educator for 40 plus years, and I'm inviting all our heroes to chat and share the secrets of their success. Well, welcome to Headcases, and you probably saw me hesitate a little bit there, and the reason for that is I'm nervously excited about this person that I have on as a guest this week, and the reason is he's a mentor of mine, a teacher, a friend, and he is part of the reason why I am who I am today. So he has trained hundreds of thousands of people across the world in business and personal development skills and techniques that are necessary to excel as a leader, as a teacher, as a speaker, as a facilitator, trainer, and as a salesperson. He's helped increase their sales by up to 15 to 85%. He's a best-selling author of books including Sales Dogs, Little Voice Mastery, one of my favorite, and his latest, which I love, which is called Summit Leadership. He has been a major role in my life, in my developing me as a facilitator, as a trainer, the things that he's taught of not just on training, but on life skills, personal development that made me a better person, better father, better trainer. And I just totally respect this particular person. So if you guys, so let's just get into this week's head case with Mr. Blair Singer. All right, well, Blair, I've said it in the intro, and I must say I think you know that in my life you've had a huge impact on my life, my career, even who I am as a father and a husband, and just from the teachings that you've had. So I must admit I'm a little bit, I don't know why, I talk to you personally all the time, but I don't know why I'm a little nervously excited about this one, but I just welcome. It is just such a pleasure to have you here and have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Chris. I mean, the feeling's mutual. I mean, our history is a long one, and it started off a little bit adversarial, and then it came together. And as it came together over time, it's just been an honor. I can just say that's the word that comes to my mind. It's just an honor to work with you and to watch you take all of the brilliance you already had, okay, in your industry, and add a few more sprinkling seasonings that I was able to offer to it, and watch you just crush it. So thank you for creating a legacy. Thank you. Just
so you don't think that Blair and I, for all the people that are watching and listening, so you don't think that we've had fistfights over this. Well, personally, he'd kick my ass anyway. The guy does like 6,000 push-ups every day, etc. But the what happened is that when he came to teach from our manufacturer, the people who were training us how to train, they found him, and I want to talk to you just a little bit about that in a second here. But I want to give the backstory on that. Is that when they were learning how to train not just me and other artists that were there, but throughout the company, how to be better presenters, I was hearing a lot of this, there was people crying and there was people upset. And so we went in kind of with a little guarded, wondering what the hell is this dude about? And I have to admit, I remember that when we were there, and if I'm not mistaken, we were in New York City at one of the major hotels there. And I watched you present, and then something clicked about halfway through that, or whatever portion it was. But I remember it was just like somebody took a 2x4 and smacked me between the eyes, because I was trained in that tell mode. And all of a sudden, I just heard you say, it's not what you say, meaning that the words aren't that important, but it's how you say it. And that kind of stuck with me. That was just this moment, this epiphany that happened that let me know the stuff that I was doing before was just the same as everybody else, and it just didn't work.
Right.
So
I remember that distinctly.
I tell everybody that story, and I have to say it was life changing for me. And can you tell the little bit of the story, and I'm not going to belay this by saying you'll remember every story that you've ever told to the hundreds of thousands of people that you've told stuff to. But I remember you just telling the people that, where was I going with this? I think we were talking about the opening or anyway. But what happened, I've forgotten exactly. What I remember now, it was that you were just talking about the way that people were trained and where our education came from and why people tend to tell.
Right.
Would you mind relating that story about where education actually came from?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, I remember that evening very well. I think it was Halloween, and people were not really even happy that they were there working on a Halloween Eve. So it was, and you were sitting in the back of the room. It was a long, narrow room. Yep. It was very dark, and I couldn't see you. I couldn't see half the participants. And it was quiet, and I'm talking, and then all of a sudden, out of the darkness came your voice and said, "So wait a minute." He goes, "You said, so you're saying that the way you teach is more important than what you're teaching?" And so for me, that was the first time that really coalesced. I mean, I kind of referred to it before, but when you said it, Chris, not only did it change for you, it changed for me, and it became kind of a guidepost going forward.
Yeah.
And the reason that's so impactful as an educator is that we spend 8 to 12 years sitting in a chair being told what to do. And it's a tell. We say, that teaching is not telling, but that's what happens in school. So you're told what to do, you're told what to memorize, you're told that you need to take a test, and then you have to regurgitate it. And if you get a good grade, you're considered smart. And if you're not, you're considered an idiot. And that's basically the first, in terms of education, 8, 12 years of your life that way. So it's no mistake then as we stand up to be teachers, and what are we going to model? We're going to model what we know, which is just to divulge as much content as we possibly can. And because if we divulge a lot of content, then people will think we know what we're talking about. But it doesn't change anything. It doesn't get anybody to make a change or a move. But what we taught, we learned is that by asking questions, you're educing, which is the word education comes from the word educe, which means to draw out of rather than to jam into. So what you do now and what we do now is that we take basically the education system and flip it about 180 degrees in so many ways. That's one. Instead of telling, it's asking. Okay? Instead of doing it on your own, you work in groups and teams, which is in school was considered cheating.
Yeah.
But in life, it's called collaboration, right? So it's the way you teach, in my experience, as you said that night, that is most critical.
Yeah. And I think when I remember that all to me was the pivotal point. I don't even remember much of my education before that because, quite frankly, I was in the half of the class that made the top half possible throughout my whole life, simply because I hated being told that I had to do and that I had to memorize. And quite frankly, memorizing something so I remember it tomorrow sits on our short-term memory. And, I don't remember shit after 2 weeks. So it's a useless form.
Right.
And I remember you telling the story about where it came from and how our and I'd repeat this often, and so I put your name on it, so it better be right. Is how it came from Germany during the industrial age.
That's right.
And we were just taught they didn't need to be creative. You didn't need to collaborate. We just wanted thinker, worker bees, etc.
There were 2 parts to that. Actually, you're right. I mean, first of it, our education system was based upon the Prussian system. Chancellor Bismarck he created the first public type school system. And basically the purpose of it was to send people off into battle, because at that time the Prussian Empire was taking on the world. And a guy by the name of Sigmund Freud, also from that part of the world, said that the biggest problem that people have are their parents. So combining those 2 things together Chancellor Bismarck came up with the concept of something called kindergarten, which is German for a garden to grow children. Because if they could separate the children from the parents, then there would be no objection for them to go into battle. So you would learn to pledge allegiance to a flag, not to your family, not to the planet, not to your fellow man, but to the flag. Okay, that you would that everything would be by orders. You would learn to follow orders. You would learn to be compliant. Okay, so then in America, when the American I think it was the Education Act of 1903 or something like that, copied that system. And in the documentation of the Education Act, it says, I'll paraphrase, that it's not the purpose of our education system that we're about to create is not to create artists, not to create, leaders, not to create any of those things. That's for the elite. They'll have special school for them. This is for people to just be happy, do what they're told, and be willing to follow orders and do that. And that is actually written into the original documentation of the American school system.
Wow.
And so it's like you're thinking like, oh my God, all these teachers, you want to blame a teacher. I can't even blame a teacher because teachers don't even know. No. They're just doing God love them because they're doing most of them are doing what they think they're doing to serve people, but they don't understand, as we always say, the context or the environment that this stuff comes through is more important than more important than the geography, the algebra, or all of that.
Yeah, and I think what I love what you said there is that it's the system that was built in, So for all the teachers that are out there, or for people that know the teachers, you can't blame the teacher because that's just the system they were put in. And thank God for the few, the ones that just really help to use what we do, know the system, and fit it into the system. Like I can remember for me, I was not good in school. And I do remember that Mr. Soretsky, I hated social studies, absolutely hated it. But somehow I never did get good grades, but he could tell stories about and make it interesting so that you wanted to listen, and it was not about memorizing facts, because if it was in a story and I could visualize it, then I could remember it. And thank God for those teachers, because they're out there. Yeah. And I know there's many of them that are out there that are hammered by this system that's still in us.
Well, and I'm going to make one more comment, if I might, and that is this: that and what happened in March of 2020. In March of 2020, when COVID locked down the entire planet. Okay, that what happened is this whole system that you're talking about, Chris, got revealed. Yep. Got revealed because immediately all the schools shut down, and teachers said, well, we'll use Zoom or we'll use some kind of video conferencing type of thing to make this happen. But what happened was it revealed the fallacy of the school system. Kids didn't show up. They bombed the Zoom calls. They put up pictures of themselves and went out and screwed around and played video games. So it was like a turtle got turned up on his back with its legs up in the air, right? And and I always say people, if they don't get it, I said, okay, so I want you to think about the 3 things that you really want to learn the most right now in this stage of your life for your family, your business, yourself. Think about 3 things that you really want to learn right now that are important to you. And I pause for a second and I'll say, I don't know what you wrote down or I don't know what you're thinking, but I guarantee calculus was not on that list. Okay? And I bet you social studies was not on that list. You probably wrote down a thing about health, wealth, happiness, communication, parenting, communication, things like that. And I always say to them, I go, so where are you going to learn that stuff? And there's 6,000 people last week, Chris. And I asked the question, the place was stone solid. You could have heard a penny drop in there. Where are you going to learn this stuff? I go, that's the problem. Nowhere. You're not going to learn it anywhere. And so that's why you and I, we teach our craft, but it's the way we teach that we're teaching people how to communicate. We're teaching people how to operate in teams. We're teaching people how to have a life, because where else are you going to learn it? There's no place to go unless it's us, unless it's whoever's watching this podcast right now.
Yeah, and that's why I think that was such a pivotal moment for me when there was that wake-up moment. I didn't even know I was asleep, but it's just, I can remember sitting with the other person sitting beside me was Sam Villa, and I remember we both went in with that kind of negative attitude, like we were shit hot, we know what we're doing, nobody teaches like us. And then we both looked at each other, and I remember, and pardon my language, I've already said a couple of cuss words a few times, but I remember that Sam and I left that program, and I remember we looked at one another having a beer, and we said, I mean, I don't understand all this shit yet, but this is good stuff. We've got to go out and see how we're going to make this work. And we just fumbled our way through it. And I still swear that those notes that we took from that class were dog-eared, bent over, rubbed, and it was just something that we just ran with. So that kind of brings me, where did, some people, they may know this podcast isn't meant for just hairdressers, but we'll listen to it mostly. And I want to talk about how you get into that field later. Mm-hmm. But for right now, with all this information, what tweaked your brain? Like, where did you all of a sudden go, oh my, OMG, there's another way to do this, to teach this. Where did you get it from?
Well,
and I have to admit, I'm sorry, you get it from implied, you got some information, took it from one person and made it your own. I mean, that's what I did with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that I've accomplished is typically been a result of something that was taught to me. I mean, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's how humanity moves forward. You have teachers that teach other people, and they teach other people. But I remember I was living in Hawaii. I was in my 20s, late 20s, and a friend of mine suggested that I go to a personal development program. I go, what the heck? I don't do personal development. That's for sissies. Yeah, it's like, why am I going to do that? And I went in that course, and it was a 3.5-day course. And in the first hour, the trainer stood in front of the room and put up a flip chart and started talking about his little earn the right, what he was all about. And I go, yeah, me too. But then he flipped the switch and he says, I was victimized by my ex-wife and my boss and the Chicago Board of Trade and business partners. I go, yeah, me too. And then he goes, but it didn't do me any good. It wasn't until I took responsibility, right? So word responsibility at the top. That's when my life started to change. I go, what? Oh. What? And so it was such an open loop for me because I was trained the other way. You got to be the best. You got to do good in school. You got to, whatever you do, you got to be the best individual on the planet, and not that I was, but that was the deal. And it so flipped it that I went back again and again and again and again. I got intrigued with this whole thing. And when he started teaching us he says he picked 100 people to teach his course for him over the course of the next couple of years. And out of the 100 people, there were only 2 people that survived the training to teach it. Myself and Kiyosaki. We were the only 2.
Your best friend.
Yeah. And we've been best friends ever since. And so it's this whole, and then I started studying Dr. Buckminster Fuller and all of these influences that slowly, because this thing up here was not bone, it was iron. Ironclad. Yeah. It was like things bounce off. Things don't go in, right? But slowly it started boring a hole in my brain. I'm going, hold on a second. Fuller says we have the opportunity to live as 6 billion billionaires on this planet if we just figure out how to work together. He says, what are you going to do about it? I'm going, well, what am I going to do about it? And I figured, I'm learning this methodology. People just learn how to cooperate, code of honors, asking questions. Maybe that would make a change. And that's been the mission ever since. That was in the early 1980s, and that's been the mission ever since. And the more I do it, the more excited I get. The more I do it, the more I want to learn about it. I mean, I got volumes of how we teach, neuroscience, all of this stuff. And it all points to the same thing, Chris. It all points to the same thing, that the brilliance is already in there. Our job is to pull it out and get people to see it and to do what's natural for human beings. It's natural for people to work together. It's natural for people to cooperate. We live in tribes for hundreds of thousands of years. But recently, in the last couple of hundred, we were taught, do it on your own. Don't ask for help, and it just kind of like stripped away the very nature of what makes human beings great in my experience. At our stage in our careers, my whole thing is like, how do I get more people to do what Chris Baran does? If I get more people to do what Chris Baran does, then we leave a great legacy. Then there's hope out there.
Yeah. And I know, because you have transformed thousands of lives, and I'm just probably one of the small ones in there. But the reality is, what's that like? What is that like for you when you see that you powered some people on for greatness? Because that's the whole thing that I think holds people back. So how do you get through to people that when they hold back? What's the biggest factor that you think?
I try just about everything. Guilt works sometimes.
Except on your family.
That's right. But seriously, it's like I've always tried to appeal to logic to get to the emotion. I guess that's kind of I've never really answered that question or had that question, but as I'm thinking about it, I try to use logic. I look, if A and B and C are not working, then why don't you try D? Okay, because we already know that A, B, C is not working for you. Okay, let's try D. Are you willing to be a little bit uncomfortable for a minute or two? And all I mean by uncomfort, are you willing to answer some questions rather than just sitting and listening and watching a movie? Okay, which is what most people do when they go on YouTube or whatever. They're watching a movie. They're not engaged. They're not doing anything. But when you ask them to do something, or you ask them to answer a question, it forces the brain to engage. And the second part of it is that I'm always, one thing I learned about the neuroscience is that your long-term memory will not hold on to anything that has no meaning, which is, and that, so that makes sense because most of us go through 12 years of school being forced to learn stuff that have no meaning to us. So, of course, we don't remember it. Of course, it's not in our long-term memory, okay? And then we're forced to go to work. The same thing happens again. We're forced to do things that have no meaning for us. So we had the Great Resignation. All these people took a break, took a breath of fresh air during COVID, and all of a sudden they're going, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Why am I going to go back to doing that? And so I think that quest to be able to give meaning to people, to get them to provide meaning to people, to get them to look at the possible options of how they can make their life better. And if they follow the course, they can get a lot better really, really quickly.
What resonated for me when you said that was most people, if you talk to them about being uncomfortable in a situation, they think that it's going to be for the 1 hour, 2 hour, 10 hour, 10-day class that you're doing. But what I love that you said is just be uncomfortable just for a second here.
That's all.
And just answer the question. And I think then all of a sudden, I think everybody goes in based on, they go into a class that whoever's teaching, or if you go into the class and you're just, because you've done it 100 times and you know what it's like sitting in the class, you've always got this little fear that's in the back of your brain, and you're measuring the class, or you're saying, well, I got myself into this problem the last time that I did this, so I'm just going to shut up, sit back, take it in. And no matter, and you know what, Blair, the hardest part is, even when you teach it, is to have that 8, 10, 12 years of crap that's been thrown at you still rears its head in my brain. And I'll tell people, I'll call people on it, that look at, we're asking a question, and I don't want a right or wrong answer. I just want an answer so I can help to gauge how to help you along. But the reality is, when it's reversed and I'm sitting back there, I still catch myself thinking, should I answer? What's going to happen? What will people think of me?
Right.
And I think that, I also remember sitting in the symposium, and you were talking in there about little voice mastery. And I remember, again, sitting with my buddy Sam Villa. We always end up migrating together. And I remember you started talking about little voice mastery. And I remember you saying specifically, we only have room, and I don't remember what the figure is. I'm just going to make it up. But I think you said, I only have room for 100 people. And I looked at a room of 10,000 people and I went, just tell me where that piece of paper is. And I remember you said that they were on these little tables on the side. And I remember Sam and I we didn't even know what you were talking about yet. We just ran over and I said, I'm going to take the shift. And I ran over and got those papers. And I think we were even filling them out while you were still talking. But that was when you were talking about little voice mastery.
Yeah.
And that is another thing that changed my life.
Yeah.
So could you just tell us a little bit about how that impacts our lives, our greatness, our success?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking, because it's pivotal, as you mentioned. I mean, and we talk about little voices. And by the way, as I explain this is so critical to part of any presentation, because this is the first time sometimes people wake up.
Yeah.
Because I say, everybody know the little voice I'm talking about? They go, it's if you don't know what it is, it's that thing in your head that just went, what little voice? I don't have a little voice. That's the one.
Yeah. That's
the one. I mean, mine sounds like my mother. How many of you have one? And at that point, everybody kind of laughs. They raise their hand. And then I go, how many of you have more than one? And then there's even more laughter. At that point, what happened is that all of a sudden there was they went from unconscious to conscious.
Yeah.
And I said, so if I were to tell you that little voice is not the real you, that's not you. That's a composite of your parents and your teachers and your preachers and the media and politicians and old experiences and friends and all that stuff in there and old advice. But it's not you. I said, there's a part of you that's brilliant, that's smart, that gets it, that's intuitive. That's a different part of you. The other stuff are all these other little voices really that sit in your brain. And then if you don't understand, I say, well, how many of you have ever been heartbroken at least one time in your life? Raise your hand. How many of you ever lost money, et cetera? I go through this list of questions, and it's all fun, right? They don't get it. And I say, so let me just show you how this works. So let's say you gave money to a friend, didn't pay you back. And now I'm with you, and we've been friends for 2 or 3 years. I don't know that you got cheated by a friend, but I come up to you and I say, I'm a little short on cash. You can loan me about 10 grand. I'm happy to pay it back as soon as I can. All of a sudden, what are you thinking? And they're all going, yeah, look, see, here's the thing. Is that all of a sudden our relationship changes that quickly, that fast, even though we have 3 years of friendship. Why? Because stored in that subconscious, and I write down, is your little voice. Now everybody know the little voice I'm talking about? Yeah. And so when people say things to you, 9 times out of 10 has nothing to do with you. It has to do something that triggered on their side. And so the whole idea, Chris, is to get them to separate that little themselves from that little voice. And at that point, that's what begins the transformation of allowing a person to change their life. Because quite honestly, a lot of people think they're crazy. I think I'm crazy. I mean, I know I'm crazy. It's not a big deal to me, but the point is, some people go, "Oh my God, I can't get these voices out of my head." And then I go, "Chill, just chill."
Yeah,
it's just programming. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, because the reality is that little voice that's talking to you all that that's your subconscious. Your conscious part is the thing that you use just to make a decision every day.
Right.
You're still in your head talking to yourself, and you're talking out the situation.
Right.
So I know that for me, that was some. I mean, you introduced me to that, and then that's where I got to meet Jason Everett, who's another great coach, friend,
great coach,
amigo of mine, one of your disciples, and I think that if people just knew what they could live up to, just by helping to do those exercises for their little voice management, that part's critical in your life.
And you're right. I mean, little voice mastery is just a series of techniques that you can. When the chatter is steering in the wrong direction, turn it around in 30 seconds. Turn it around in 30 seconds. And just by doing that a couple of times, then you don't have to do it anymore because you've reoriented your own mind.
Yeah. I remember I remember you taking us through exercises on Little Voice, and I believe it was in that same class where you'd stand up and get a partner, and you'd have to tell, how big are you, and then you'd do another one that was, I deserve this because, and you did all these bragging exercises.
All right.
And you know what? But everybody at the time, I think, was going, sometimes your little brain, your little voice will tell you, well, this is stupid. This is stupid. Yet they'll go and they'll watch YouTube and they'll see that little girl standing on the counter, looking in the mirror, doing a morning affirmation. So I love my family and I love going to school and I'm going to get great grades. And yet that's the same thing. That's exactly what that is it's reprogramming your brain.
That's right. Those are affirmations. That's right.
Yeah. So those are all things that work. And that has been big for me. And I tell you that even when people go through those programs, I say this wholeheartedly, that when we went through Little Voice Mastery and some of those things, when they ask you, what do you want to get out of this? And I remember that setting goals, and in 6 weeks, we ended up earning just over $300,000 based on the course that you were teaching. And so if just flipping a switch in your brain to reprogram is one thing, and you think I'm a better person, but if you're money driven and all of a sudden making you a different person and a different salesperson, just by asking rather than listening to that little voice, I'll tell you, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I remember that. And I think that, what I've learned too is I don't think people really even change. I think that really what happens is you pull back the onion or whatever it is a little bit, and the brilliance that's always been there just gets revealed. Mm-hmm. I had a great teacher once, a great mentor, who said, just if you can find out what works in somebody else and focus on that, then all the other garbage kind of falls away. Yeah. Whereas I'd spent most of my life, even when I first got turned on to this stuff in the 80s, what's wrong? Let me fix that. Let me fix this. Let me fix this. You know what? It became an endless journey to try to find out what's wrong because there's plenty wrong.
Yeah.
And rather than Alan Walter said, he says, if you can find out what's good in the person, where they're at their best, and start with that, then the rest of it begins to lose its power. But I think that we go through school, and in school, the whole system of schools, you hand in a piece of paper, and it comes back full of red marks. So all you get back is what didn't work, 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 and you're hoping to minimize what didn't work so you can at least pass. It's like it's just a different way of looking at life.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so great about the education that's being that. And I know that while I think that depending on who you teach, because you teach on sales, you teach on personal development, you teach on how to train, and I've been a part of all of that with you, but some people just know you as a salesperson.
Right.
But when I remember you telling me the story about, and I believe his name was Po Chung, the co-founder of DHL.
Yep.
Tell the story about how they're searching. They wanted to change their education.
Well, yeah, it was really funny. I got a phone call one day in my office from a guy that maybe you guys know, Mark Victor Hansen, wrote Chicken Soup.
Yeah,
because I know Mark, and he calls me. He goes, "Hey, I don't have time to talk to you right now. You're gonna get a phone call from a guy by the name of Po Chung in about 30 minutes. Just take the call." I say, "Who is he?" He goes, "I don't have time to talk. Look him up. He's gonna call you." Really, really bizarre. So I look it up. I look up Po Chung, and all of a sudden I see chairman of DHL. He retired. All this. Holy mackerel! So he calls me, and he just, as if he's known me my whole life. He goes, "Hey, is this Blair?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, so here's the project. The project is there are 7 universities in the city of Hong Kong, 7 universities." And he goes, and they wanted him, because he's from Hong Kong, to create a business curriculum that really makes a difference. And so every place I go all across East Asia, when I ask people about teaching and teaching teachers, your name keeps coming up. So I'm talking to you. How are we going to do this? And that's how we started our work together. So we worked together about 2 or 3 years to work on curriculum and with some of the most brilliant minds out there. I'm not sure how well the project took off, but he came to all my programs. He went from being a student to being a mentor to being a coach. I mean, it was amazing. But he said something, I might add this. He said something when he came to one of my trainer type programs. He goes, "This is it." I go, "What do you mean this is it?" He goes, "This is it." These were his words. He goes, "You know what, Blair? You're absolutely right. If you've had any success in business, these are his words, it becomes a societal responsibility for you to teach that to other people. Otherwise, we never move ahead."
Say that again.
Yeah.
Say that again.
He says, if you've had any success, and I might even add any failures in your life, it becomes your societal responsibility to teach that to other people so they, A, don't make the mistakes or repeat the mistakes, or B, that they have the knowledge that it moves everybody ahead. Otherwise, everybody's got to rediscover everything all over again. But I wrote that down and had it for the longest time on my desk. It said, a societal responsibility to teach. It's a societal responsibility to teach. And that's why I say teachers are leaders, because it's critical.
This episode is sponsored by the Salon Associate Accelerator from trainersplaybook.com. Are you struggling with the time and cost of associate training? Do you feel like your salon is running you? We'll get your associates on the floor, all with 90% less time from you, so you can get back to building your business. Get them world-class design, finishing, color, and client care skills they'll use every day for the rest of their career, while you focus on realizing your vision. Go to trainersplaybook.com and get the Salon Associate Accelerator. And now, back to the show. Blair, you also, there was one little other word that you put in there, and that's your failures as well.
That's my words, right?
If there's one thing that I've learned from you, and I'm going to be I've told this, I tell it all the time because it's true. You alluded to it at the beginning that we are products of our teachers, and we teach how we were taught, because that's the only thing we knew at the time. And I remember when I first started teaching, I'm not saying the people that taught me were assholes, but they came from a hierarchical position where I'm good, you're not so good, and you had to build yourself up to my level. And I took that on at the very beginning of my career when I was teaching, and through no intention about it, but I just thought that's the way you taught. And there's people, I'm sure, somewhere in the world that still won't hire me because of that. But the thing that I learned from you was vulnerability. And you never came out, I don't think you said to be vulnerable, but I learned from you that you would always tell us a story and then how we got there. And then you'd say that here's some of the screw ups that have happened. And here's how it affected me. And then I went, oh, well, if you can do that, then it's okay if I screw up every once in a while too. So I think that part that you put in there about teaching the successes that you've had will create societal change, but so will just being vulnerable and sharing what went wrong, if anything else, only to let people know that we're not perfect.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you said it perfectly, is that one of the reasons that I talk about my mistakes is first of all, to let people know that that's how we learn. You learn by making mistakes. Okay, we make more mistakes than we have actually more failures probably than we have successes overall. But each one is a learning experience, so we get better with each one as long as you don't hide them in the corner. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that I always say that if you want to be a great teacher, people say, "Well, I don't have charisma and I'm not a good performer. I can't remember." I go, look. Myth number one, you don't need charisma to do this. What this is, it's not a performance, it's a conversation. I said, you can have a conversation with somebody, can't you? You go, yeah, well, then that's all this is. little bit of structure around it, but the whole idea is that you have a conversation. But to your point, Chris, you got to lose this worry about what other people think about you. And one of the easiest ways to do that is just be upfront and honest with what's going on. That way, you're not going to get popped on stuff. You know, people say, "Well, you have no idea what you're talking about." You know, it's like, which is the greatest fear, you know, that any teacher has. You know, it's like, what if they? I don't know everything. It is not possible to know everything, and I'm not counting on me knowing everything. But I bet you I can find out the answers. You know, and I think that if you're willing to be honest with people, it's a breath of fresh air. You know, brings to mind one other quick story is a couple of years ago I went to the Dhammakaya Buddhist temple in Thailand. So one of the largest Buddhist temples in the world. And I had the honor of sitting with one of the senior Buddhist monks there for 2 days. And it was fascinating through translation. And he said he wrote a book called Train the Trainer, interestingly enough. And in this book, and he told me, he says there's 3 criteria for being a great trainer. Number 1 is your material, what you're teaching. Is it relevant? Okay, is it relevant to your audience? Fair enough. He goes, that's not as important as number 2, which is what you and I already talked about, which is not so much what you're teaching, but the way you teach it is way more important. And this, I'm hearing it from a Buddhist monk, right? But he said the 3rd criteria, which is the most important of all, is who you are as a person, as a human being, how you show up. And that hit me really hard. He goes, because people, just like he said, most people, just like little kids, can see through you pretty quickly. They know if you're walking the talk, not walking the talk. They know if you're bullshitting or not. They kind of get a sense, a comfort feeling or not around you. And so the best thing to do is be the best version of yourself as much as you can. And for me, since I have a lot of screw ups in my life, it's talking about them, because then the energy's off. And people, and the other thing that it does is it lets people know, like, okay, so if this guy can go screw up and lose $750,000 doing blah, 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 I haven't lost that much, so obviously there's hope for me. Okay.
Yeah. And it's just outright disarming, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you tell them, people aren't used to people telling them how they messed up something, because they think that there's this person up there that, wow, look at them. They're the speaker. They haven't messed up. They haven't done anything wrong. They're just telling me how to do and be better and have what I want to become, etc. And they never tell the horror side of it.
No.
And therefore, I just, half the time, if I've been in those classes, I think, well, there's no way I can do it anyway, so I'm not going to even try. But when you tell stories about how you screwed something up and you help to turn it around,
right,
it makes all the difference in the world, because it just disarms people.
Right. And I usually tell people, you know, and by the way, I learned how to prevent that from happening, but I didn't apply it. I didn't think it applied to me. And sure enough, the universe has a way of saying, okay, you think you're better? We're going to throw you this curveball. Let's see how you do with this one. And you go, oh,
handle this one.
Okay, got it. I got it. Very humbling. Fuller said, you know, we're born naked and helpless on this planet. And the truth is, we wouldn't last 20 minutes without the help of somebody else. And that human beings learn by trial and error. That's how we learn. And it's the accumulation of the learnings that we make after thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of mistake making that got us this far along as it is. But nonetheless, we still deny. We don't make mistakes. I don't make mistakes. I don't want to make mistakes. You know, it's just you know, in our group, like with you and me, you know, we share our mistakes. It's kind of like a badge of honor. You know, it's kind of like, you think that was bad? Let me tell you this story.
You know, Blair, I just remember when going to symposiums and things like that in the early day, and that's what we would do. We would just sit around and we would tell road stories, horror stories of what what happened on the road when we were doing it. Do you ever have any of those? Do you like, because even for you talking to you right now, and I know you've told me some of them, but the reality is most people think that a Blair Singer is going to go to a class. There's going to be between 6,000 and 10,000 or more people there. They've all paid like $9 million to go to one class for 40 minutes as you're going to. And, but they don't think about all the times that you go when something screws up. Have you ever had to screw up on a session that you've been done and paid a lot of money? You were paid a lot of money to do, and those ever happen?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, of course they happen. You know, it's like those aren't even the worst. I remember the first presentation was the biggest screw up. Kiyosaki and I decided to do it. We had never presented ever, so we thought we'd do it together. We were going to co-teach our first live program. It set up 100 people, 100 registrations came in, and all that stuff. And and only 2 people showed up for the program. We have a room set up for 100 people and 2 people sitting in the back of the room. One guy thought it was a real estate seminar and he left. And so it was one guy in the room. That was how I started my teaching career. We never even did the program. We figured we'd take the guy to the bar, have a few drinks, and try to sell him something. And that didn't work either.
Yeah, because usually they can smell when it's a sale.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, there have been tons of them. I had people stand up and say, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're, cheat, a fraud. And I mean, in the early days, a lot of that. Not a lot of it. A couple big ones. And it took a couple of big ones for me to get through my skull. I had that happen once. I was just learning. It was back in the late 80s, and I had taught part of a program, and my mentor was teaching the whole program. And the room blew up. I had somebody, we talked about how to make millions of dollars in a business and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I did the whole game, and the debrief was great. And at the end, I said, are there any questions? Guy raises his hand. Turns out he was one of the wealthiest real estate developers in all of Southern California. He raises his hand. He could smell the rat. He goes, hey, wait a minute. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're talking about making millions of dollars. I bet you've never seen $1 million in your entire life. This game was nothing more than a betting game. It's a cheat. It's a scam. I want my money back. I mean, right in front of 120 people. I'm going, and I just panicked. And I was like, so all I knew was to ask questions. So I go, I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question? Maybe you didn't hear me the first time. I mean, it was a nightmare. It was horrible. I mean, people demanding their money back. I lost the room. It was, somehow I got out of there, and it was a 3-day program. That was day 2. I go back to the condo we were staying in. My mentor's there, and he's watching TV, eating popcorn. And he goes, well, how did it go? And I told him. You know what he did? Chris, he laughed.
What?
He just laughed. He was in hysterics. He thought it was the funniest thing he ever heard in his life. He couldn't even catch his breath. And I'm thinking to myself, my little voice is going, I don't need this shit right now. I mean, it's like my worst hour, my most humiliation I've ever felt in my life. And my mentor's laughing at me. But when he could catch his breath, this is what he said. He looked me square in the eye. He goes, okay, so what did you learn? Boom. Wow. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't give me advice. He just asked a quintessential question. What did you learn? And I go, oh, Marshall, I guess I learned how much I still have to learn. He goes, good. So tomorrow you go back to class and clean it up. I go, nope, not doing that. He goes, yeah, you are. I go, no, I'm not. I'm done. I'm not teaching ever again. So we go back. I'm sitting in the back of the room. He's teaching. He's making it all good. He goes, now before we go to a break, Blair has something he'd like to say to the group.
Oh, no.
I go to the front of the room, and he goes, what do you have to say? And I look over, and that guy that jumped me was sitting in the same place in the front row. I look over. I see him. He's looking at me with a scowl on his face. And I don't even remember much of what I said. I looked over at him, and I said, the only thing I want to say to this group is that Sandy was the guy's name. I go, Sandy was right. He said that I'd never seen $1 million in my life. He's right. And I don't even remember what I said after that, but I just started sobbing in front of the room. Oh. Talk about embarrassing. Chris, snot coming out of my nose, hitting the floor. I mean, it was like, I don't even know what was going on. But when I got done, however long I was there blubbering, you know what happened? I got a standing ovation.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what is happening right now? What am I learning now? And what I learned that lesson that night, that morning, was that the universe has very strange ways of teaching you lessons. Yeah. Some people get it with a feather. Some people get it with a sledgehammer. Some people get a Mack truck. That was a Mack truck. I mean, I got run over. But what I think what it was, that people just appreciated the honesty, the authenticity, the vulnerability. Yeah. Somebody that was just real with them. And that changed everything. So look, I'm full disclosure who I am right up front. Okay. And I think that those experiences, like the worst nightmare of a trainer, of any person, is to be publicly humiliated. And the reason I'm telling this story, that if you're a trainer, a teacher, or a leader, that sometimes at your worst moments are actually your best ones.
Yeah.
The worst ones are your best ones. If you can just get your brain to hold on to that for a few seconds longer and be honest about it.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. And you said blubbering and snot coming out of your nose. And I think you know where I'm going with this. I remember being in upstate New York at a power training class, and you were coaching all of us on everything from facilitation to personal development and how to be better on stage presences and so on. And I think we were on day 7 or 8, whatever it was. And this was 12 to 14-hour days. And I remember it was, I think it had been noon. It was something happened somewhere around noon. And you were coaching somebody. And I remember sitting there going, I can't do this. I just can't hold somebody's feet to the fire like that. And I remember sitting there, and I remember just putting my head down, and I started sobbing. And like you said, I was using the tablecloth to wipe all the secretions that were coming out. And I remember you remember that? I left the room.
I remember.
And I left the room, and because I couldn't hold myself together. And I went for a walk out. We had this beautiful place. I went walking out behind the hotel. And then I went to my room, and I did what every grown man would do. I went to bed. I rolled up in a fetal position, put my thumb in my mouth, and tried to go to sleep to get the stuff to go away, because I couldn't get this feeling away from me. And I'm going to apologize for anybody who's about to hear what I'm going to say, because it's a true story. Sam Villa, who was my roommate at the time for that gig, he came up to the room, and I was still in bed. And I don't know if I was just feeling sorry for myself or I needed somebody to say something. I don't know what it was. But he went, Chris, you need to come downstairs. And I went, no, I can't. I can't. I'm going to quit. I can't do this. And we went through this for about 20 minutes. And then Sam looked at me and he said, Baran, get your fucking ass out of that bed and get down there. People are worried about you. And so I kind of did my thing, and then I went down, and I remember I got down there just in time for graduation. And I remember what was the theme song from Lion King was playing. There was candles in the room, and I started to melt down again. And then I remembered that I can't remember if this was before or after, but I said I have to talk. And we went outside and we talked about it, and I just said I don't know if I can, and so on. Don't remember all of the conversation for there, but I went through the motions. But here's the part that I'm getting to, and what I've learned about what happened to you there and what happened to me at that moment is that it was probably about 3 months later, and I was put into a situation not worth going into, but I remember being put into a situation where I had to control all these hairdressers and get all the people from a major city together and get them to share stuff. And it went off like a charm. And I just took control of everything. And I just remember those people booked me back in to come and do 2 or 3 more of those. And I remember that way that night, because I think I was flying out later that night, and the consultant drove me to the airport, and I was very silent on the way because it was a good feeling after it, and we chatted for a little bit. I dropped me off, and I think I still had 30, 40 minutes to wait. And I had your phone number, and I remember calling, and I heard this brrr, brrr, and I went, oh shit, he's in Europe or in some continent somewhere. And I remember that when I left a message, and I remember the message was, Blair, I take back everything that I said that night, is that if you wouldn't have put that group and me through those paces, I could have never survived today. And here's a point that I'm getting at, is sometimes when we're going through a breakthrough, we're having this moment that if we can get through it, we're having a breakthrough to get through the other side. If I would have copped out, I would have never got the breakthrough. I would have never got to the other side of that. And so that was another thing that cemented having, Ann Mincy always talks about having heroes in your life, and you've always been a hero to me. And that's what I always try to emulate with other people, is that if you can hold your feet to fire but yet know that you and them can be courageous enough to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
And know that it's safe to do it.
Safe.
And I thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's an honor. It's an honor. Yeah. Not everybody goes through those kinds of epiphanies either. I think when I'm listening to what you said, and this time again, and I look at my meltdown, say, well, do I have to go through a meltdown to become who I want to become?
Yeah.
And the answer is absolutely not. You don't have to. It's just that people that are stubborn, thick-skulled, resistant, think they know better, and have a strong ego, it's a little bit harder to get through. But when you finally get it, and for me, it's like that moment of awesome, of unbelievable responsibility, which is exactly what you just said, because that was the exact thought I had. That night, I wanted to quit. That's it. I'm done. I'm never going to do this. I can't do this. Okay? When I got jumped. And what you said is that that's it. I quit. I can't do this. But you did. Because there was a part of you that understands the awesome responsibility of what we do, which is teaching. Now, not everybody's meant to be a teacher. But I will say this, is that so many times in my life, all of us, everybody, you want to quit. You don't want to do it. It's too hard. It's all these other things. And what holds you back in? What keeps you going? And if you can begin to isolate what that is, then the next transition is a little easier. Back in those days, Chris, I apologize a little bit because, we were just doing whatever it would take to get ourselves to get to the other side, as you call it. Yeah. With limited knowledge. Now your knowledge, my knowledge, our knowledge is much greater. And, and it doesn't have to hurt like that. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't take it back for all the money in the world. Never, ever, ever, because it changed my life. And it forced me, and it got me to see that the amazing responsibility, all these people, all the trust that they put in you, all those students, all those thousands, hundreds of thousands of students, millions that put their trust in you and put their trust in me, that's a big deal to me as a teacher, and so all I want is I just want to be the best. I want to be the best Blair Singer that shows up today. And whatever that's going to take to do, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral to do that. And I'm just blessed that people like you have come into my life that have gone through some of those transitions and then have taken the message of how we teach, or the way you teach and who you are as a person, and just spread it through an entire industry, and it touched so many lives. It's not important that they know where it comes from. It's just important that they do it, that they do. Because if we do, we all win.
every time that, and again, this is what I always say, I've learned so much from you, but I always learned every time you learned something, you always gave credit to who you got it from. And so I've always brought that in. And because I think that, I remember when I first started out, I remember Doug Cox, who was a motivational speaker and still a good friend of mine. I remember that when I first started on the road, he would go on stage before me, standing ovation every time, because he's, motivational speaker, getting everybody whipped into shape, and, people crying in the audience. And then I would go out and do a color technique, and I remember it would freak me out, because I would go get ready to go on stage and he'd get a standing ovation. And I go, shit, now little Mary Baran's boy Chris is coming on stage to teach him, color technique or a perm technique. And I would go, okay. And I would always, that little voice at that time would destroy me. And I remembered bringing this up in one of our meetings that we had after. And I just said to him, Doug, number one, I don't know what you do. I watch you do it. I see you do it. But how do I get over that thing with the audience? And he said, it's really easy, Chris. Just walk on stage and just say, as my good friend would say, and he said, just use my name. And then you're my friend, therefore you have the power that he has, So I don't think none of us knew about little voice management at that time, But that was something that helped me really right along. And I always, if you learn something, we learn it from our teachers, you give credit to your teachers. I don't know how I'm going to segue into this, so I'm just going to go out right there. This book has been sitting there, and this Summit Leadership, and the reason why I'm after reading the book, it really is all based on your trips to Kilimanjaro, and I would love if you would relate the story of your first climb and where that came from with your son, and the messages that you got out of that.
Yeah, happy to. So Summit Leadership is a combination of an adventure story, a true adventure story of climbing Kilimanjaro 11 times, I think, when I wrote it, and also of how it applies to your business and to your life. But the way it happened is back in 2012, I decided to go to Tanzania with my at that time 16-year-old son Ben. We wanted to do some community service together, so we went to go do community service there. We found a great company to take us there to do that, and part of the deal was you climb Kilimanjaro. Well, so I don't know how well we trained, but first day on the mountain, fine. First night, my son got violently ill. I've never seen somebody get this sick. I mean, vomiting uncontrollably. It was partially altitude, I think some medication that he had taken for yellow fever or something, and maybe the food, I don't know, but he just couldn't stop. I've never, all night long, we're trying to get him healthy again, wrap him up because he's shivering. Next morning, the team has to move on, right? So I said, Ben, can you go? He goes, I'll try. So we're hiking. That the next morning he's going really slow. He can't put anything in his system because it immediately just comes out again. So about an hour into it, we stopped to take a break, and we're just above the cloud line, right out of the rainforest. I'll never forget the scene. I call it Ben's Rock. It's a big flat granite piece of rock that we're all standing on. And I look over at him and I go, Ben, can you make it? And he's leaning on his hiking poles. And he goes, Dad, I just want to go home. I'm looking, he's got yellow rings in his eyes. I mean, it was just horrible. So I'm looking at him and I can see the summit now 5 days away, but I can now see it, off to the right. And the lead guide says, what are you going to do? Because the protocol is you can have a porter take him down and they'll take him to a clinic or something like that. And I could continue the climb and see him 6 days later. But the thought of sending my 16-year-old down into a third world Swahili speaking country did not seem appealing. But it's like my little voice going, but you came here to climb. You came here to accomplish something. You set a goal. You get it. You set a goal. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Now, this didn't take a long time, but I remember looking over the cloud line. What are you going to do, Blair? And it's like, I'm just being honest. So if there's any mothers listening to this right now, you're going, what are you, some kind of a Neanderthal creep? Okay. But I'm telling you, this is the truth for me. And then all of a sudden my little voice kicks in. And again, just excuse my language. What do I do? What do I do? And then all of a sudden my little voice goes, hey, you wrote a book about this, you asshole. Team code of honor. Team code of honor. Never abandon a teammate in need. I go, okay, I got it. I'll take him down. So I made the decision with a porter. We take him down. You take him to this. Took 8 hours to get down the mountain, in an hour in the back of a van and into this little clinic, which is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath little place in a neighborhood with 4 beds that were really massage tables, of which 2 were occupied. They lay him down and put an IV into him. 18 hours, he's out. And they said, no, we got to keep him here. I go, you're not going to keep him here? This place, there's flies, there's animals running around. You can't do this. They go, no, he's too dehydrated. You got to stay. I go, well, I'm staying with him. And I laid down on the table next to him. We fell asleep. Next morning about dawn, I hear outside the window, rooster. And I open my eyes. I look at him. I'm looking at him. He opens his eyes and he sees me laying there and he gets this big smile on his face and he goes back to sleep. And I'm going, holy shit. I actually made the right decision. Chris, I could have made a catastrophically bad decision at 10,000 feet for all the justifiable reasons. My God, thank God. Code of honor. I carry a code of honor to protect me from myself. Okay.
Yeah.
So we went home. I never thought I'd go back. 6 months later, he goes, Dad, we got to go back. I go, what do you mean go back? He goes, there's not a day I don't think about that mountain kicking my ass. I go, okay. We went back. And on July 3rd, 2013 at 11:30 a.m. Tanzania time, we hit the summit together. We laughed, we cried, and we hugged. And it was like we made it all the way to the top with our team. And I had a little gift for him, Chris. My backpack was a keychain with a engraved pendant, and it said on the front, it said Kilimanjaro 2012, 2013, and on the back it said, we start together, we finish together, and I will always have your back, Dad. Yeah. And I gave it to him.
Wow,
changed everything, Chris. I was ready to quit. He was ready to quit. But because, as you said, we pushed through it together, changed. Yeah. I learned, it wasn't about climbing a mountain after all. It was about learning how to be a father. It wasn't about even learning how to be a father. It was learning that there's things bigger than mountains called love. I didn't expect to learn that at Kilimanjaro. And on the way down, there were so many lessons I had in my journal book. I go, I got to share this with other people. So every year since then, we created a mountain leadership team, which would go up. I take students that want to go, that are willing to train, and we go up to the top. We're going to, in 4 weeks, we're going to be there. I'm going to be summiting for the 12th time. Time. And every time at the end of each day, at each camp, what lessons did you learn? How does it apply to your life? And so the book, long story short, the book is because of my son it happened because of my son getting sick. Yeah. And out of that adversity, out of that problem came magic. But had I quit, there would have been no magic. So the book is a life experience of summiting Kili. And what I always say is mountain leadership is like business leadership. Every day, every decision that you have to make in your business and in your life is mirrored at some point on that mountain. The only difference is you only got 6.5 days. You got to deal with it right now. You don't have years to play it out. And so it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to get those lessons. It's the most fun book I've ever written, and it's probably the most impactful one because the final story of summit leadership, it's never about the summit. Every climber will tell you it's never about the summit. By the way, the summit's only halfway. You still got to get down. But the other part of it is the summit. You just go up there, take a picture, and you're gone. Okay. The whole idea is the summit is a magnet that pulls you up there. But the ripple effect or the processional effect of all the people you meet, the things you learn, the lessons that are given to you, and up there is a very spiritual experience for me. The lessons and the messages that come through are amazing. Amazing. And that's what the book is about, is those lessons and how you can apply them. And thanks for asking. I'm all fired up. I'm just ready to go again.
Yeah. Well, you know, the what I loved that I think in there, you in the book you talk about the protocols, and I think when in the Code of Honor we are always talking about the rules that we all make together so that we can live, work, and have a reasonable relationship as we're going through our work life. And I think that word protocol really changed when I read that in there for me, because I think that those people that like are rule breakers or say, well, that's just a rule, blah, blah, blah. But when you talk, a protocol is something that you do for the right reasons so that everybody survives.
Right.
You know, and I think when you're talking about the mountain protocols, they're equal to your business protocols that you have. And I think that's why in our business there's so many people that lose their team. Well, everybody's going to lose their team at one point or another for whatever reason. But, you know, it's on good or bad terms. And if people know you do the right thing, then, you know, that's your protocol that you set up in advance. If you can't live by the protocol, then you shouldn't be there.
One of the protocols on the mountain is an expression that says pounds equal pain, which means as you go up in altitude, obviously it becomes more stressful. So if you're carrying a lot of weight on your back, on your backpack, it becomes more and more difficult to move ahead, to move up. So what's the solution? So the protocol is to lighten your load early, okay, and to keep your load light so that you can continue up. And so what's the lesson there? Well, the lesson is this. Everybody's concerned about goal setting. But maybe before you do goal setting, maybe you should take a look at, what I'm going to be spending, for example, the next 3 weeks doing is calling back the things that I want to take with me. I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need this. I don't need that. Up until the very moment we leave to go up that mountain, I'm trying to lighten loads because I'm used to having all my luxuries and having all the things I want around me. Now, so that's a process. That's a protocol, is to lighten the load. Otherwise, you will suffer as you try to get to your goal, right? So for us, that's not just lightening what's on your backpack. In business, those are people that you've been carrying around that maybe you shouldn't be carrying around. It's attitudes that you've been carrying around. It's old thoughts, old assumptions, old belief systems, old ways of doing things that will only hinder you going forward. So I tell people when you don't do New Year's resolutions, sit down and make a list of all the things that you want to get rid of, that you don't want to take into the next year with you.
Yeah.
Start there. So that's a protocol that I got from the mountain.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that is so, I mean, even I'm having epiphanies just as you say that right there, because I think that's the thing, we tend to hang on to everything for so long. Blair, I'm trying to even think right now, how do I take my teacher, my hero, my friend, and try to pack in all the stuff that I would love to be able to chat about into one episode in 1 hour? And I just come to the realization it's impossible. But at the end, I want to do this with you. We always call what we call a rapid fire. In essence, I'll give you some stuff and just quick 1 word, 1 sentence answers.
Okay.
What turns you on in the creative process? In other words, when you're trying to come up with something that's new, stuff that you're going to add to a program, etc. In that creative process, what turns you on?
What turns me on is being passionate about what I do, first of all. The second thing is to be out in nature. And the third thing is being around other very cool people. That 3-way combination I learned through COVID. Because when I lock myself down and do all that other stuff, it just does not work for me. I got to be out, free, and with good people.
Yeah. And what stifles it for you?
The opposite, being locked down in a padded cell. Like I'm in my studio right now, but it's like I got to get out of here in a little bit.
Okay, an event that you loved, something like that. I'm sure there's many, but the standout one that you did. You did an event and it was just an OMG factor. Well,
you know what? There are a lot of them, like you said. I'd say, and my long-term memory is weak. I will say that the one I did last weekend was the best so far. And it was the best so far. It was a big audience. it was right in my strike zone. And this is a group that had never responded to any questions, anytime, had no clue about Little Voice Mastery. My perfect audience.
Okay. And in life in general, what do you dislike the most?
Dishonest people that don't tell dishonest people, period.
And what do you love the most?
I love people that are real and that are present and that care.
A person that you admire the most?
You. In the moment. No, it's like everybody said, always these questions like, who do you like the most? What's the one? There is no one. There is no best. There is this amazing tribe of leaders, and you're one of them. You're one of them. And so the people that I admire the most are not the people that have made it. It's the people that are work in process. Yeah. It's the people that are helping other people make it. Those are the people that turn me on the most.
Well, I'm going to end right there. No, but thank you. Is there somebody out there in the world or that you still wish? I mean, you've been on stage with the greats. But is there a person out there you'd still love to meet?
I didn't think so until, like I said, I did this conference and I met 3 or 4 amazing authors and speakers that I was just in awe of what they learned and had the opportunity to spend some time with them. So I just love learning. Yeah. So anyone that I can meet that has taken a topic or a subject and really dove into it, that's what I love, being around those kind of people.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's learning is it all. Is there something about you that people don't know?
At this stage, probably not. But I think that one thing that people may not know about me is that I feel very, 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 very deeply. I'm a very emotive person. I cry a lot. Mm-hmm. I yell a lot. I'm quiet a lot. And I run around screaming at myself a lot. And I wouldn't have it any other way, but that's just me. Yeah. And I'm not afraid to tell people about it because it's all part of who I am.
You're a workaholic, and as a lot of us are. But if I go like that and I gave you a month off, what would you do? Where would you go?
I'd find some project to take on.
That's me too.
I think I'd be good for about an hour and a half on the beach, and then I gotta go do something.
And we were sitting in the pool yesterday, and I was going, I got this other project. I should start on that. I get like my computer down here. Is there anything that terrifies you?
Yeah, I think what terrifies me at this stage of my life actually is the fact that the things that I've created or the things that I've set out to do may not happen, or that there's no legacy to what we've created. That really does. And I never thought that would ever happen. It just happened over the last couple of years. I started thinking about that. I go, wow, how many years I got left on this planet? And what's that going to look like? Right. And it's like that point, fear came up. And so I got very motivated to drive harder.
Yeah. Favorite curse word?
Huh?
Favorite curse word?
Fuck.
Favorite comfort food?
Filet mignon.
Ooh.
A beef tenderloin.
Nice. If you had one do-over in your life, what would it be?
I probably would have invested in Apple stock a long time ago. I think that might have been a do-over. But other than the rest of that stuff, I wouldn't change a thing. Quite honestly, I wouldn't at this point. Wouldn't change a thing.
Blair, just last question. If there was, for the people that are watching or listening, for whether they're in their industry or not, if there's something that they should stop doing or let go of, what should it be?
Well, the first thing comes to mind, I would do my best to let go of your concern or what other people think about you. That's for me personally, and what I've watched, that's the number one killer of dreams. It's the number one killer of self-concept, of self-esteem and peace of mind.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Yeah.
Because you think they really care. And even if they did for a moment, they really don't care. You're the one that cares.
Blair, I don't know if I can gush anymore about you, but I just want to say thank you so much. You're always so giving of your time, your knowledge, your wisdom. And I just want to thank you for your time that you spent with us here on Headcases.
Well, I love it. And by the way, I love the title of this program, Headcase. So appropriate.
Yeah, but you got to be one to do what we do.
That's true. But thank you, Chris. Maybe we can do it again sometime. I'm open to that for sure. And just thank you for doing what you do. I mean, I know it's a trite expression, but I know what you do, and I see the influences of what you do. And while we don't speak all that often as I'd like to, I just know that your influence is far and wide and global, and a lot of people are moved by what you do. And it's kind of like a brothers in arms, and just thank you for doing it. Thank you for being one of the good guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being the instigator of all those messages. So Blair, one more time, just thank you. And it's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Chris.